Coming up was Christian Harris. I kept seeing his name and his posts, and so I reached out to Christian and said, "Hey, tell me what's up, and how can you help our industry really with the information they need to understand what it means to be clean." I think we all would have said that our parks were clean in the past, and we did a good job cleaning. But as we make that more visible and ramp that up during this reopening phase, what does that look like? What are the new things that we need to do? What are products and services that we can avail ourselves to? So I reached out to Christian. We had a good introductory talk at the end of last week. And so I'm just, without further ado, going to let Christian introduce himself, and he'll be sharing his screen with some great information. And if you do have questions, feel free to use the chat. We'll be keeping track of those, and at the appropriate time, whether during the talk or as we get to the end in the Q&A, be answering those together. So Christian, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the funny accent, guys, but I have to say I'm based in the UK and in London specifically. So I've been listening to a bit of Florida Georgia Line this afternoon just to kind of get myself in the groove. But I'm not sure if I'll quite have the accent down. But and obviously apologies if I say any words the wrong way that you guys won't understand. But hopefully it'll all be clear. Thanks very much, Scott, for inviting me. Happy to be here. And hopefully we can share some interesting stuff that will help you guys and give you a bit of a roadmap in terms of the kinds of things that you should be looking for. I think, as Scott said, this is going to be recorded, but I'm also going to send the slides across to him, and then he can circulate those around as well. So everybody here can see all of the slides. There's no secret source or anything like that that's hidden in here that we don't want to share freely. I think, Scott, just to check, are we going to be doing questions as we go, or are we going to kind of leave questions until the end?
I think if you have a question that you think of, go ahead and post it in the chat, and then we'll circle back and are you able to see them? I believe you'll be able to see them if they post to everybody.
Possibly, yeah.
And Al will kind of help ask those in the appropriate way.
I'll probably be in my flow, so why doesn't somebody just interrupt me?
We'll interrupt you. Either myself or Al will interrupt if it makes sense. So
cool. Okay, well let's get into it, and hopefully, as I say, hopefully this will be useful for people. So if this works. Hello. Bit of background then about me. And my business. This image I really like. It's kind of my LinkedIn background, and this kind of encapsulates what we do really. It's all about helping people to make their facilities cleaner, safer, and more hygienic. So we do a lot of work with insurance companies. We do a lot of work with leisure centres, health clubs, gyms, but also shopping centres, airports, factories, and various other environments. This is kind of an example of the outputs that we get. The other side of our business, which has obviously been quite busy at the moment, is all around decontamination and hygienic cleaning. So it's all about, getting rid of the potential for this virus or doing stuff proactively to try and give you guys the best chance of stopping that from building up in the first place. There's a lot of bad information out there around this. A lot of people have been going out and getting these kind of Ghostbusters guys here that you'll see but actually have they been checking exactly what they're doing, and is that going to be beneficial or not? So there's a lot of stuff going on that maybe isn't the best way. So hopefully today we'll give you a bit of a roadmap of the sorts of things you need to be doing, the questions you should be asking, and what exactly you need to do. There's a fairly long article there linked at the bottom if you're interested in all of this stuff around COVID, deep cleaning in particular. In terms of my business, again, just a bit of background, just so you can kind of get a sense for who we are and what we do. I've been working in this kind of field of cleanliness, hygiene, and safety for over 10 years. Most of that time was actually in a product manufacturing business, so making and selling cleaning products. Latterly, in this current business, it's a service-based business. My business partner, Margus, he's been involved in hospitality and housekeeping for over 15 years, including in the States. He's run housekeeping in five-star hotels, lots of five-star hotels before. And one of our investor directors, he's from an insurance background. He's got a group of businesses, including a risk management practice, as well as an insurance brokerage that insures lots of leisure and hospitality clients. So we've got a fair bit of expertise. And then these logos might not mean much to you guys. IHG probably does. Langham might. AIG, I guess, as an insurer, and Marsh probably do, but some of the others maybe not. But in the UK and in Europe, these would be quite well known. Sorry for my co-workers, by the way. I've got a couple of co-workers that are just about to go to bed because it's just after 7 o'clock here in the UK. So if there's any background noise, that's what it'll be. And then a couple of examples of just kind of customer successes. We've helped people to improve their net promoter score, which is a big key measurement here in health clubs. We've helped people to drive additional sales through doing deep cleaning work, and we've helped people to dramatically reduce the number of slip and trip accidents and insurance claims they get, which save them cost. So interesting times to say the least, and I found this quote from Forbes, which I thought was interesting. So it's talking about a trauma, and it gives people a heightened awareness of our own mortality and a heightened sense of vulnerability. And really what that means is people are looking for safety, security, and comfort. And that's what they want when they're going out and investing their free time visiting one of your facilities. They want to feel safe, secure, and that they're being looked after and they're being valued. So that's the kind of background to all of this, really. My strong view is that, and I don't know, I have to say, how the standards in the US are compared to what I'm used to in the UK, but cleanliness in the past has been something that in these types of buildings, I think, as Scott said, everybody thinks they do pretty well, but actually, certainly here in the UK, the standards haven't been as good as they needed to be in the past, but people have kind of got away with it. So I think now this is going to be a really key battleground for members, because you've only got one chance to get this right. If you open your doors after the lockdown and people walk in and they see that things haven't changed, things haven't improved, there's a good chance they're going to think, well, what have these guys been doing for the last 2 or 3 months? Do they really value me? Do they really care about me? So I think that there's going to be a bit of a sea change in terms of those operators that really invest in cleanliness are going to be powering ahead, and people that don't will be falling behind. So a few statistics here just to underscore this point. So this is all UK based, but I'm sure that the message translates in whatever country you're in. Members have always seen cleanliness as important when it comes to any kind of gym, health club, leisure activity. So 71% of people would say cleanliness is very important, whereas price is only 61%. So cleanliness more important than price. IRSA, which I don't know if you guys would be part of or not, or have heard of, but it's the International Health and Racquet Clubs Association broadly. They published some data which showed that a club in the top quartile of investment in cleanliness had 2.35 times the annual revenue per member of a club in the bottom quartile for investment in cleanliness. So just putting across that even in the past, there was this very strong business case to invest in cleanliness and hygiene. We've done some work here looking at, there's an organisation called Sport England, and it's kind of what funds a lot of leisure activity in the UK, and they do a survey both looking at member feedback and financial performance of hundreds of health clubs every year. And we did some analysis of this, and actually what we found is that there's a very strong correlation between cleanliness and satisfaction, satisfaction and net promoter score, and cleanliness and net promoter score, and therefore, again, just evidence that there is a bottom line impact to poor cleanliness. And IRSA, again, they would say, and this is in the UK context, but the average health club in the UK with 2,000 members would be losing about £45,000 a year, which is probably about what, $75,000 nowadays, something like that. The interest rate, the exchange rates are fluctuating all over the place, but a fair amount of cash anyway, just through attrition, through cleanliness. And there's an interesting point here. The Forbes quote touched about on vulnerability, and I think that there's a really interesting point around the wet areas and the changing rooms of any of these places, because that's where people perceive the importance of cleanliness to be most critical. And that's because they're standing still, they're in a state of undress, and therefore they kind of notice their surroundings more, and they're more aware, so they have a kind of visceral reaction. So if you've got, you know, slightly grubby floors around your treadmill in a gym or something like that, you're probably not going to notice it because you're concentrating on running. But if you're standing in the shower and it looks a bit grubby, and you know there's sort of body fats or whatever on the walls, you know, gross things like that, you're going to notice it, and it's going to have more of an effect on you, and that's going to be heightened by this whole thing that's been going on. If you're interested, there's been some really good webinars from Club Solutions magazine, and this guy Blaine, who owns a couple of clubs up in Washington, he's been quite prominent in those, and he's saying, you know, you've got to start mapping out every single step of the customer journey and think about it from the perspective of somebody that's worried, you know, that's fearful about cleaning and sanitization. So think of it from the customer perspective, from the moment they come through the door to whatever activity they're going to do. What could they be thinking about? Some more data there from URSA, you know, floor cleaning, for example, 68% of members say it's important, but only 5% say floors are the cleanest area in their club. And this is an interesting one, again, from the UK. It just underscores that we here have been under delivering, because cleanliness of activity spaces, which would be relevant to all you guys, cleanliness to changing rooms, relevant, I guess, to all of you guys as well. Number 1 and number 2 in terms of customer importance on this survey, but actually satisfaction, bottom 2. So a massive gap between expectation and reality, and that's in the old world. What I see here, and I have to say as well, I've done work in Europe as well. I've not done any work in health clubs in the States, but what I see here is that there's kind of a blinkered approach. So people, I don't think managers of health clubs or attractions, you know, want their facilities to be dirty. Clearly they don't, but I think they haven't really historically looked at it properly as to understanding, well, what is cleanliness? What standards are we looking to get to? So hopefully some of the stuff we're going to get onto in a minute will help you to understand what that needs to be. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Yes, that is a picture of me on my wedding day in Positano in Italy, which is the lovely town photographed. But I think I got married 5.5 years ago. If you asked me to put my wedding suit on today, I don't think there's much chance I'm going to fit in it. And that's because, but I don't feel as if I'm fat or anything, but that's just because your weight kind of creeps up on you slowly, gradually, day after day. And cleanliness is kind of like that. So it can escalate and get past the point of where it's a problem, but you wouldn't notice it because you're so close to it, you're seeing it every single day. And another factor is that there's a massive churn in the sector. And I'm sure that's the same for you guys. You know, the staff aren't working there for 10 years. So if you've got a 10-year-old facility, it's unlikely that there are many, if any, people there that actually know what it should look like, because they weren't there when it was built. So we've got this kind of haze, shall we say, and we've got this lack of understanding of what good looks like, and that's driving some of these issues. Some interesting data and analytics. There's a good company called My Customer Lens, who I recommend you check out, and they do like real-time analysis of tweets. So for a chain in the UK, just before the lockdown that we started here in March, the tweets about cleanliness increased by 3,900%, and as a comparison, that was almost 3 times as much of an increase as any tweets about freezing or cancelling membership. So this was really, really front of mind for people, by far the biggest thing that's front of mind. We are seeing here that people are ready to now start getting back into exercise and start getting out and doing leisure, which is great. I'm certainly keen. But what we're not going to do is, I don't think we're going to accept kind of poor standards. We're not going to walk through the door, as I said, and accept something that we don't believe is really clean. So I think that's really critical to say. One of the challenges around cleaning is that cleaning is the delivery mechanism of cleanliness, and cleanliness is valued. So if you survey people, or if you speak to stakeholders, investors, directors, managers, whoever, they'll say cleanliness is important, but they'll undervalue and underinvest in the mechanism of achieving cleanliness, which is cleaning. So that's one of the gaps there that we need to try to address. And you kind of get a bit of a vicious circle. So it's undervalued, you cut the budget, you get poor outcomes, you try something new, but because you've cut the budgets, you can't really do the new thing properly, therefore you get poor standards, and so on and so forth. So we need to kind of chop that circle and try and refresh. So all of you guys that are watching this are going to be in normal times cleaning your facilities, but there's a big difference between clean and clean. So clean and clean. So it's all about what's effective cleaning. What does it really mean? How do we try and manage it? How do we understand how to do it? What are the signs we need to look for? How do we measure it? How do we quantify it? So this is kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about today.
Hi, Christian.
Yeah.
We have a question from Sven. They were on an earlier webinar and said that they had a controversial discussion about how and if to justify a higher entrance price in order to make up for a lower allowed capacity. How would you communicate cleanliness and what components of that from perspective of an operator in order to promote people to come back and accept higher prices?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a tricky one. I mean, certainly here, the view among the operators of facilities seems to be that with social distancing and all the other factors, we're probably going to have 100% of overheads and perhaps 30% of capacity or 40% of capacity. So there's going to be a big shortfall. I think that cleanliness kind of should be a given, but I do think that people with their heightened awareness are going to be more aware, and they're going to be more conscious that you are going to need to invest more into it. I think one of the key things is actually about communicating it effectively. So actually, can you take videos of what you're doing? Can you take before and after photographs? Can you do some stuff around quantification and testing of the measures you've taken to demonstrate the value and prove what you're doing? And actually, that's then a conversation you can have with your members, your clients, to say, well, look, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and you can justify a potentially higher price. I do think that there's going to be, there's always been the kind of the higher end and the lower end in this world, and I think the higher end is probably going to get higher in terms of outcomes and therefore cost. The lower end probably can't go much lower, certainly here in the UK, so they're probably going to creep up a bit. So I think overall there is going to be an increasing price, and I think hopefully that will help to justify some expense when it comes to this. So hopefully that answered the question. So thinking about true cleanliness, just a couple of analogies. So imagine you were going for an operation, and you were wheeled into the operating theatre, and the surgeon was there, and he pulled out his scalpel and he wiped it down with his handkerchief, popped it down on the table, and then he said, right, let's get started and we'll slice you open. Now, if you hadn't seen him doing that, that scalpel would look clean. You wouldn't notice that it had been cleaned in that way. You wouldn't have known about it because it's a kind of an unseen thing. But the fact that you've seen it being done like that, that it's going to have germs and it's not going to be that clean. So thinking about, what's real cleanliness, and actually how do we demonstrate that and prove that to our clientele. From a floor perspective, this guy here just mopping some sort of sports hall floor, but think about, let's say a kitchen floor. If you were just mopping a kitchen floor with a bucket of water, just fresh tap water and no chemical, you could mop that floor. After you mopped it, it might look a bit cleaner, but actually, is that really clean? So looks aren't everything, as I told my wife when we first met, to try and seduce her. But it's really true when it comes to cleanliness. Just how it looks, that's important, and don't get me wrong, customers are looking for that, but actually that's not everything. And sometimes you can be lured into a bit of a false sense of security by it looks okay, but actually there are some underlying issues there. So we talk about this concept of 3D cleanliness. So we think about standards, so that's the qualitative stuff. So how does it look? What does it feel like to touch? And how does it smell? So look is pretty obvious. Touch, I'll give you an example. I was visiting a theme park, looking at their cleanliness and hygiene, and we visited, their health club and the swimming pool, and we visited the kitchens and various other areas. But we were in one of their restaurants, and the floor, they had a kind of vinyl floor, sort of wood effect vinyl floor, and it looked pretty clean. I wouldn't say it was dirty in any way, but when you started walking across this floor, it was really sticky underfoot, because there were a layer upon layer of kind of grease and other contamination there. So how something how something feels to the touch is really something you should be thinking about. And then smell. Smell is arguably even more visceral than how things look and how they feel. And so if someone's coming into your facility, how it smells is likely to be the first thing they notice before they notice how it looks. So thinking about what you can do there. Now, I'm not saying I recommend plugging in those kind of odor maskers in every plug and sort of every socket, and that's all you do. Of course not. But thinking about this in a round way, these are the qualitative things that you should be trying to achieve. Then we've got hygiene, and that is quantitative. So we can measure hygiene levels. So there are ways of measuring how much bacteria is on different surfaces. Going back to the question about justification of higher fees, but potentially higher dues. Well, if you instigated some sort of hygiene testing and certification of hygiene standards, that's an investment, there's an outcome there, there's a benefit to the client, and that could help you to justify that. And then another way of quantifying cleanliness, only really applicable to floors, is the slip resistance as well. So you can have a floor that looks clean, but it's got kind of invisible contamination there. It would probably fail a hygiene test, but it would also fail a slip test. So there are three sort of types of metrics that you can use, and you should try and figure out a way of managing all of these three things. I'll just give you some examples as we go.
Yeah, Christian, I have two quick questions for you. One, Robin Mills from Rugged Interactive asked, do you believe that we might need like sanitation stations by anything you touch, doors, barriers, and LCD screens for registering when you enter the park, and other LCD screens? Surely it'll be impossible to limit touching items altogether, is his point.
Yep, I think that that is going to be a very good way. Well, your customers are going to need to take some responsibility for hygiene. We're all in a world where we know we have to wash our hands, and we know about sanitization and all this other stuff, and we knew about it before, but we really know about it now. So what we can't have is the lockdown ends and then people just kind of go back to what they were doing before, because that's going to cause all sorts of problems. So I think it's important, that you recognise and that customers recognise that they've got to take some responsibility for this, and you've got to enable them to do that, because you can't wipe every door handle every time it's used throughout the day. It's impossible, and therefore you need to try to figure out other ways of trying to promote hygiene and safety when it comes to those things. So having hand sanitizer stations around could be useful with some notices. If you've got gym equipment and things like that, trying to have some sort of practice where actually there's a notice up to say, after you finish this, please use this product and do this and blah blah blah, and that's going to just help. All of this stuff, is going to be a challenge to get people to implement, but I think you've got to try your best to get your customers involved in this as well, and pitch it in such a way that it's for their benefit. So I think there's an interesting thing here around how you set up your facilities, but also doing some training to your staff about the importance of this, what they can do to help people, what they should do if they see somebody that's kind of blatantly flouting the rules and isn't following what they should be doing, and how to deal with that as well, particularly in a world of social distancing where you can't sort of walk up to somebody and have a quiet word in their ear. How do you go about doing that? So some interesting questions there. But I think if you want to be seen as a safe and a conscientious and a customer focused place to visit, I think those are the kinds of things that you should be looking at. Yeah.
And thank you for that. And also we have Shanika McCombs. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing that name incorrectly. So she was asking, we're in the world of adventure parks, trampoline parks, and things like that. And I'm sure that within your presentation here, she's looking for specific examples for her own park that may pertain to her park, so that she can move forward for the COVID opening.
Sure. So basically today I'm going to give you some principles about the kinds of things to look for. I'm going to point you in the direction of loads of more content, but also I'm going to say at the end that if you want me to help you with a very specific and targeted and bespoke plan for any of your facilities, then I can do that. There would be a small charge for that, but yeah, that's something that we can definitely help with, and we can do it as a desktop exercise with floor plans and photographs, and sending us lists of what chemicals you can buy and who your suppliers are and all this other stuff, and we can come up with a plan for you that would work for you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Christian, as those that are attending, who would have come from the trampoline or leisure industry are looking for, I think they would say, we understand that we need to clean, and there's a difference between clean and clean. Yeah. And I expect you'll be moving towards this, but just looking towards some very practical, hands-on.
Absolutely,
points that they can take.
Yeah, no, we're getting into that now as we speak. So yeah, that's good. These are just some examples of some of the standards that we see. Hopefully, none of your places look like this. So why do we have issues, or what some of the issues that can happen with cleanliness? So I think there are 5 key drivers. So there's the point about surfaces aren't cleaned often enough. There's an issue around understanding what the right standard is. There's a challenge about man hours. So, if you want to clean JFK Airport Terminal 7, I think it's Terminal 7 that BA fly to, and you said to somebody, right, you've got 50 minutes a day to do that, well, that's impossible. So thinking about the amount of time you need to allocate to the tasks. There's a whole piece around the skill set of the staff. So training, equipping them properly, giving them the right check sheets and methodologies and stuff, and actually the right motivation. So I haven't met I've met thousands of cleaning operatives over the years. I've not met many bad ones that wanted to do a bad job or didn't care. But the ones that were there and not really doing a great job were because they weren't being supported well enough, I would say. And then there's a piece around how do you equip them from the perspective of, the right products, the right equipment and all that sort of stuff. So those are kind of the headlines as to why sometimes these things aren't working as well as we'd like. What I would say is, don't just go blaming a cleaning company. So if you outsource your cleaning, it's not the cleaning company's fault necessarily if the standards aren't what you'd like, because again, every time I've ever looked into a contract that a cleaning company has with a client, the cleaning company is delivering what the contract says. but there's often a gap between the expectation of what the client, the standard the client wants, but actually the contract says this, and there's that gap. So just thinking about that, you do get what you pay for. From a equipment and a chemical perspective, what I've seen over the years is that these things are only as good as how they're used. So if you buy some great equipment from some of these companies like Tomcat or an IMOP or something like that, that's great, but if you're only using it for 10 minutes a day, it's not going to give you much of an outcome. If you're buying chemicals from Ecolab, who do good products, for example, and who are big in the US, that's great, but if they think you need 10 litres a week and you only buy 2 litres a week, you're probably not going to get the right outcome. So it's thinking about setting your budgets and setting your processes around what outcome you want to get, getting proper advice, and then following that as closely as you can, and that's how you're going to get the right kinds of results. So we've come up with this acronym of ROTAS, and this is kind of how you should go about thinking about a cleaning regime. So this applies to both, can we do a deep clean now to get ready for reopening, but also going forward, how do we maintain? So these are the 5 areas that you need to get right. So regularity, so how frequently are we cleaning things? So think about, as we said, the door handles and high frequency touch points are going to need to be cleaned several times a day. But other areas, you might be able to clean them once a week. Other areas, again, it might be once every 3 months. Lots of areas need to be cleaned every day, but often, not just in this sector, but in shopping centres and train stations and all sorts of other environments. In the past, cleaning's been undervalued, and therefore budgets get cut, and areas that should be getting cleaned every day are getting cleaned every 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 days, and therefore we see a degradation of standards over time. So thinking about how frequently do we really need to be cleaning different surfaces in order to get the outcome that we want. Getting the organisation right. So what that really means is about managing the process. So understanding what outcomes you want and communicating those to the team that's delivering the cleaning. Clearly, measurably, hopefully, and somebody taking responsibility for this. And I guess, in these times, that could be you guys, the business leaders. Time we've touched on, but you can't clean 1,000 square meters in 15 minutes and expect it to stay clean. You just can't do that. So you've got to allow the right amount of time. And there's some tools we can share with you about that. Ability is all about giving the staff the skill and the experience and the training to be able to do the job properly that you expect them to do. And S, the system. So as we say, get the right products for the right surfaces, get the right equipment, get the right brushes, the right pads, and all this other stuff. Get all this together in a holistic system, and you're going to do good cleaning, and you're going to get good results. If you fall down in any one of these areas, it's going to be much more difficult.
Christian, I have 2 quick questions for you.
Sure.
One, and you kind of mentioned you were going to say something about this at the end, but are there specific cleaning products you can recommend? Are there different products for trampolines, climbing walls, touch screens, VR headsets, etc.?
I mean, I mentioned Ecolab, for example. We do a bit of work with Ecolab. Ecolab work with Marriott around the world and various other big brands. I think they're either number 1 or 2 in the world in terms of products. And they will have a full suite of products that would work for you on all of those different surfaces and in all of those different environments. So I can say that they have good products. There'll be other companies as well. Most companies, to be honest, that you're likely to have relationships with will be able to supply you products that will do a decent job on most of the surfaces that you need them to work on. But it's all about choosing the right product for the right surface. So it's no good having a degreaser, which is perfect to use in the kitchen, and trying to use that around the basin in the washroom where there's limescale, because that's just simply not going to work. So one of the things that we see a lot of is kind of, we have one chemical for cleaning floors, and one chemical for cleaning equipment and one chemical for this. And I can see why people have done that in terms of rationalization and trying to make things simple from the perspective of the guys and girls that are doing the cleaning. But actually that's not the best approach. You need to have a slightly more bespoke approach to that.
And also within trampoline parks, foam pits are a big attraction. So we find that that's the one of the more difficult, or I guess people don't trust the foam as much as they trust everything else to be clean because it is porous. So is there anything that you suggest for something that's porous like foam?
So there are some products, I think from the perspective of cleaning them, I think, I can't see a way of doing it other than manually, removing and cleaning every single one, and which is quite laborious. But there are some products out there that have a residual effect from the perspective of they will kill off germs and bacteria as they touch, and they'll help to repel dirt. So for those types of areas, that's the kind of technology that I would be looking to go down the route of using, because you can't realistically be emptying a foam pit every day and cleaning every single piece properly and disinfecting it and so on and so forth. I think you're not going to have the time to do that. But doing it once a month properly and applying this kind of residual product, that could well be the best way forward. I will, if it's okay, I'll have to check whether the product that I know here is being used, for example, on the tube in London, and they've tested it on carriages where they've kind of left them in service for a month. They've done one carriage using this product and one carriage without, and tested all the bacteria levels, and it's just dramatically reduced everything. I'll have to check if that product's available, how widely it's available. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but we can circulate that. Perhaps when we circulate the slides, we can pick up on some of these questions, and I can give a bit more detail and some examples to everybody.
And for anybody that's looking for those follow-up answers, we will be sending out email tomorrow, and we have our website, townhall.funspot.com. Don't worry if you don't have to write that down. That will be in the email tomorrow to all of you. So the information, we will put it there, and I'll make sure that you get that information as soon as we receive it. And our team has put together a list of preferred cleaners that we'll send out as well, that might help you along. Okay. And so basically the questions are just overloading with specific cleaners. People are a little bit nervous about the harnesses have certain materials and things that it can mess up, and as well as the foam and stuff, so chemicals can break down the foam. So anyway, we'll continue to gather those questions, and I'll let you move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on some of those points, but maybe not be as specific. So going back to that 3D cleanliness thing, there's the quantitative stuff. There are ways of assessing the level of hygiene that can be done instantly, so you can know for sure whether the process has actually worked or not. And you can also do a slip test on a floor to know, with much more certainty whether actually your cleaning process has been effective or not. So there's a product that I really like called Fresh Check. And this is a way of measuring hygiene on a surface, and it's dead easy to use. It's literally just a little bottle like that. You spray it, and it changes color if it's got bacteria on it, and if it doesn't change color, it doesn't have any bacteria. Now, this doesn't test for coronavirus, but a surface that has got loads of bacteria on it may well have the virus. A surface that has no bacteria on it, it's impossible to have the virus. So this is a good thing that you could use, and it's a good way, again, of communicating and demonstrating value to your customers that you're taking this very seriously. There's also ATP tests and other ways of doing it. In terms of, this is really critical, in terms of disinfecting, you can't disinfect a surface without cleaning it first. So any surface that's got some contamination on it, some biofilm on it, if you go in there with like the kind of Ghostbusters garb and you start fogging this and electrostatic spraying that, you're not actually going to be doing a thorough and a proper job. you need to be doing a 2-step process with a clean and then some kind of disinfection. So that's one really key learning point, because there are a lot of companies that I'm seeing, you know, on LinkedIn and stuff, fogging this, fogging that, but they're going in, spending 20 minutes doing that, and actually that has some effect, but it doesn't have the effect that you're going to want. From a slip perspective, there's an organisation over in the States called the NFSI, and they could point you in the direction of slip testing as a way of, again, quantifying the effectiveness of your cleaning regimes. If you're in the UK, I can help. If you're in another country, give us a shout and I can point you in the right direction. But if a floor surface is slippery when wet, particularly a textured floor, you know, it's likely there's some contamination there. So things to consider then in terms of getting into some more specifics. So PPE is clearly one. Now we have guidance here from Public Health England, which is a government agency, around, you know, what you should do if you've got a known case of COVID and what the PPE you need to wear is. And it isn't as in depth as this photograph here. So I think just check, you know, wherever you are in the world, check what your government says is the correct PPE, or get some advice from somebody like a health and safety consultant or whoever you might use for that. But just make sure you're giving people the right PPE. One of the questions was about protection or not damaging of surfaces. So this is really important. So, you know, you can't. Bleach is a very good disinfectant, but you don't want to start spraying bleach in foam pits, and you don't want to start spraying bleach all over your trampolines, for example, or bleach all over your flat screen TVs. So thinking about looking at manufacturers' guidance of different products, whatever they might be, and what they recommend for cleaning, but take those with, I don't know if this expression exists in the States, but take it with a pinch of salt. So don't necessarily read it as the definitive guidance, because typically manufacturers will give you very generalist advice that they know will not cause any damage to their products, but they won't necessarily be the best way of actually cleaning stuff. But bear that in mind. You don't want to be causing any damage and staining things and stuff like that. And then another key thing is about contact time. So if you look at any of these sanitizers or disinfectants or anything like that on the bottle or in the technical data sheet, they'll tell you the contact time they need to actually kill these germs, and typically that's a matter of minutes. What often happens in day-to-day life, you know, if you go to a Starbucks and they're cleaning down the table, it's a spray, it's a wipe, it's gone. You know, that product has had 5 seconds, if that, on the surface. There's no way it's killing any germs or doing anything. You know, they may as well not have bothered from the perspective of hygiene. So thinking about the contact time. In terms of like basic kit, so okay, we want to try and do a clean ourselves to get things ready, and then potentially stay on top. These are the kind of bare minimum things you're going to need. So you're going to need some cloths, like microfiber cloths would be ideal. Different colours, because you need to bear in mind cross-contamination and things like that. So use the right colour for the right environment. The same thing with your mops and things like that. Some spray bottles, some of the right chemicals. It's going to be varying for different surfaces. And then probably you want some sort of like machinery, like a buffing machine like this one, or a scrubber dryer or something like that. Potentially a wet vacuum as well. If you've got carpets, you're going to need to think about cleaning those in a different way. But this is the kind of bare minimum kit you're going to need, because actually this kind of clean and disinfect phase is really about just spending enough time and doing it diligently and thoroughly with the right product, more so than actually specialists or anything like that. Some of the photographs I showed you earlier, you know, they were very dirty floors that needed some proper specialist deep cleaning. But I kind of feel as if, you know, the majority of what you guys are going to be looking at doesn't need that. It just needs to be, you know, properly cleaned, and then it needs to be disinfected so that you can stand there with your hand on your heart and know that you've done the right thing for yourself, but also so you can then say to your staff, your colleagues, obviously, because you need to protect them, but also your customers, you know, we've done everything we can to get to the best possible standard. So that's the basic kit. And then in terms of a process, what I would suggest is, there's a bit of trial and error here. So thinking about trying something out and then testing it to see whether it's actually working from the perspective of that 3D cleanliness. So does it look cleaner? Does it smell better? Does it feel less tacky and sticky? If so, that's a tick in the box. If it's a floor, does it feel less slippery when it's wet? If so, that's a tick in the box. Can you measure in some way the hygiene? If so, that's a tick in the box. Well, if you tick all those 3 boxes, fantastic, crack on, let's get it done. If not, then potentially you need to think about, well, what else can we try? Do we need to tinker with something here? Do we need to change the chemical? Do we need to change the process? Whatever it might be. But it's this kind of iterative process that I'd be recommending that you go down. What I see a lot of is people, in the past anyway, will they'll ring up their janitorial supplier. They'll say, I need a product to clean my washroom floor. They'll just send them something. They'll just use it. They won't actually interrogate that in any way, shape or form to see whether it's effective, whether it's doing what it needs to do. They'll just do it, and then down the line they'll figure out, okay, there's a problem. This is the opportunity in your business, in all sorts of ways, but in this as well, to actually start interrogating stuff a bit more, kind of come up with some best practices, and get into a position where you're really confident that what you're doing is working.
Hey, Christian, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and just do a little time check. I mean, we're getting at about 10 minutes till 3 here, so we'll want to...
the slides are almost done, so then we can...
Yeah. Okay, just to be thinking around... I apologize, I had to hop off and take an urgent customer call, but talking about UV and its effectiveness, the difference between porous equipment versus hard surface equipment, carpets, and disinfecting trampoline park equipment, which we'll address in our follow-up piece. But just wanted to think about whether you use Ecolab or Cintas and the different products that are available are all good. Going back to your basic kit slide, all very important pieces that you don't have the cross-contamination and that you have a plan and that you work that plan and you're consistent in that plan. I think all those are the 3 things that you look at. Yeah. But, as you wrap up here, just in the next couple of minutes, just thinking about some of these last pieces that people have asked around carpets, how often, dwell time of viruses and cleanliness and things like that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, basically, those are my slides almost, other than to say, in terms of further stuff, visit the website, connect on LinkedIn, Twitter and stuff, and there's some good content there that you can follow. And as I say, if anybody wants us to look at something in a very bespoke way, we can do that, and provide you a full kind of spec of what you should be doing. So happy to do that if that's of interest.
And you'll take someone's floor plan, looking from the time that people touch the door till the time they go to their restroom, till the time help them think through timing, quantity,
all of that stuff.
Okay.
We'll basically give you a plan to say, look, this is where you are now. This is where you want to be on the day you reopen. Here's what you need to do. And then we'll say, okay, going forward, here are the things that you should be looking at to do as well, based on a bespoke plan for whatever your facility looks like. Because, we've gone through the principles here that are relevant to everybody. But obviously, if you've got 500 square foot small community facility versus a 5 million square foot mammoth thing in a big city, it's very different in terms of what you need to be doing. So going back to some of the questions then, I mean, carpets obviously are going to harbour stuff more so than hard floors, and they're harder to kind of clean. So I would be looking down the route again. There are various products available that you can use to both clean and protect carpets to prevent them from getting contaminated and harbouring germs. That being said, in the majority of cases, floors are not really of a huge concern when it comes to COVID-19. We're really thinking about touch points and areas that are going to have skin-to-skin contact. Now, of course, if you've got, I've got young kids that go to Gymboree, so I know that some of these areas clearly are going to be a concern, but a lot of carpet areas probably wouldn't be. But again, there are products there that you can use that will help you to protect and repel any germs and contamination as well.
How about fogger type situations? If you think about a soft play, children's plaything, is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, so I mean, the way we would go about doing a clean if we were sending our teams into one of your facilities is we would go in and we would kind of do a full physical clean from kind of floor up to sort of 3 meters or something in normal cases, obviously, so because that's what people are going to touch, and then we would go in and use electrostatic disinfection. So there's 2 types of these machines that kind of are doing fogging, using layman's terms. There's a fogger and there's electrostatic spraying. Both of them are atomizing chemical and spreading it out in the air. The main difference is that the electrostatic versions, they produce a charge within the chemical, which means that the chemical will cling to any surfaces, and that it also won't, it repels from the particles of chemical. So what it means is you get a much more consistent and even coverage, and it will kind of wrap around stuff. Whereas fogging is more directional. Fogging's a bit like a spray bottle almost, if you think in that way. If you spray it against this surface, that's great, but it's gonna disinfect here. Mm-hmm. Whereas with an electrostatic thing, if you spray it this way, the disinfectant is actually going to kind of wrap around and envelop around. And the UV would be similar. The UV is going to be more effective against stuff that it's actually hitting, not necessarily things it doesn't. So from the perspective of thoroughness and also ease of use, electrostatic is probably better because it's kind of more foolproof, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But that's how we would be doing it. We would be going in, we'd be giving any areas that were properly dirty, we'd give them a proper clean. Then we would be going around and kind of cleaning all other surfaces to remove any biofilms, any contamination, any dust, anything like that, because anything like that on a surface is going to mean that a disinfection is not going to be effective. And then we would be either using electrostatic disinfection most of the time, or sometimes people don't want that. We would be kind of physically going in and disinfecting. I always use the analogy, if you're traveling on an airplane or a train and you've got the tray table in front of you and it looks a bit grubby, what do? We reach for an alcohol wipe or whatever, and we wipe that surface down and we think that's done. But actually, you might have a disinfectant wipe, but if you're wiping down that surface with the wipe once, all of the active ingredients in that wipe are going to be used up in cleaning the surface. So you'll have cleaned it, but you won't actually have disinfected it. So you need to get another wipe out, wipe it again, and then that's done. And it's exactly the same with this. It's a double process. Very important to remember.
I think that analogy you give has probably been the biggest eye-opening as a former operator, become manufacturer, supplier, is that you can't disinfect a dirty surface, that you have to clean it first and then disinfect it. And then, I don't know if you want to flip back. I would love for you to end on your basic kit slide. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. And once you've disinfected it, you don't need to be doing that again and again and again, because then you can stay on top of it, with sanitization or with some of these protective things, and just by good cleaning practices. Yeah. But I think there's certainly a case to disinfect right now. That's these are the three things operationally to think about. PPE. Make sure you're not doing more damage than you're solving. Think about your contact time. Mm-hmm. But then, it's just basic stuff you need. This isn't, it's not rocket science. It just needs the right amount of time, the right amount of diligence, and a bit of knowledge or support to know that, you're using the right thing on the right surface in the right way.
The other big learning I've had in doing a number of interviews and research is the idea of using microfiber. while I'm not an expert, I would say that you probably don't want to have string mops back into your parks when you open up and are cleaning your floors. You really want to look at microfiber as both in your rag and in your mops. There's some benefits to that, and I'll have some links in our on our website and post recording.
Yeah, you're sort of. The other thing which I didn't mention is that rinsing is really important in your ongoing cleaning. So if you think about if you don't have a dishwasher and you've got dirty plates at home, you've had dinner, you've got some dirty plates. Well, what do? You soak the plates in washing up liquid in the sink, but that soaking doesn't clean them. The cleaning bit is when you actually take them out and you rinse them under the tap. And the rinsing is actually the removal. Cleaning is about the removal of contamination. And so unless you've got some sort of physical action or some rinsing, you're not actually removing dirt. So these Kentucky mops, or the typical mops, the old-fashioned ones, they're just moving dirt around. They're not really removing much from the surface, whereas a microfiber is going to be taking stuff off. So thinking about, again, within the process part of this, the system of ROTAS, that cleaning is about removing contamination. Cleaning chemicals don't clean. Cleaning chemicals help you to liquefy dirt, so then you can remove them.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's see. I'll take JC's question here and then we'll wrap up. JC asks, how many times a week should we disinfect a trampoline park?
Well,
I'm not sure
I think, I think it's important to be clear on the terminology. So I think that you want to be disinfecting it before you open and get trading again. And then I think, cleaning is the removal of contamination. Sanitizing is the lessening of viruses and bacteria to a acceptable level, and disinfection is the removal of viruses and bacteria. So if you disinfect and then you reopen, you then want to be getting into the realm of sanitizing and monitoring that for its effectiveness, and therefore you probably don't need to be disinfecting that often at all. It's about sanitizing, so that's just a terminology piece. But I would say that you need to think about the frequency that surfaces are being touched by people's skin. So in a trampoline park, I suspect that most of the trampolines are getting touched several times a day by people's skin. So therefore you need to be thinking about trying to sanitize those on a regular basis throughout the day, I would suggest would be best practice. But sanitization isn't the same as what I've talked about of a clean and then a disinfect. A sanitizer can be a single product, a single process, much more quick, much easier. So it's a different thing. I don't want you to go away and think you've got to close down every trampoline for half an hour between every use to clean it and let dry.
We are thinking about some recommendations around rotating which trampolines are open on a main court or in the dodgeball court, or if you have 3 that go into the foam pit, how you rotate and begin to wipe down those. So we'll be providing some recommendations for Fun Spot manufactured equipment. And I know Headrush made some good comments around, we have different products that have different components that have different requirements, and so it's very important that you do look to the manufacturer's recommendations and combine that with some of the knowledge of the products and services that are out there, so that you're cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing, but you're not damaging any of those products. So, well, listen, it's right now 2 minutes past 3. I appreciate each of you hanging on for the little bit extra. Thank you, Christian, for enlightening us, giving us some really solid background on the behind the scenes whys, but also some practical tips. This whole deck will be available tomorrow online at townhall.funspot.com, as well as some additional recommendations from our team here at FunSpot. And stay tuned to look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday. We'll be posting our topic and guest speaker. If you are interested in speaking or being interviewed by myself, or a topic, please use the Townhall website to get in touch with us, and we look forward to bringing more good content to you. So thanks everybody for your time, and I hope you have a great afternoon. And thank you, Christian.
Pleasure. Thanks.